Hello and welcome to Championing Equitable Instruction and Inclusive Classrooms. This is the 9th annual HILT Conference brought to you by Harvard's Office of the Vice Provost for Advances in Learning. I'd like to invite the Deputy VPAL, Dustin Tingley, to kick things off for us today.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to HILT's 9th annual conference. For those unfamiliar with these events, let me just introduce this very briefly. It's meant to really provoke meaningful discourse and dialogue across Harvard schools around educational innovation, and really try to equip people to begin to think about how to experiment with their own teaching with practical insights nonetheless. And further, to really expand the network of people at Harvard across schools, whether they be instructors, senior leaders, academic professionals, staff, and students, to explore their educational practice. When Aaron Driver-Glynn invited me to the very first HILT conference, I can't emphasize how powerful that networking aspect of the HILT community really is, and I'm thankful for that. This year's theme is Championing Equitable Instruction and Inclusive Classrooms. It began to surface shortly after last year's conference on peer learning, when we began engaging with faculty and academic professionals, really trying to seek impactful resources to navigate the charged conversations that were arising in our classrooms. Since that time, a range of events have reinforced our view that this theme should be central to our work and indeed our annual conference. As a result, we've brought the community together. We're really excited about today. Today we bring together a diverse, active, and engaging set of speakers and panelists, and we're really looking forward to participating today with you. Before we dig deeper into our agenda, we have a message to share from President Bacco, and then Provost Alan Garber will join to share a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Dustin. You and the entire HILT team and your working group have been doing so many terrific things to advance learning and teaching. All of us are fortunate, and Harvard is stronger because of your efforts. And I just want to express my appreciation, especially for the behind-the-scenes work that's made even less visible when we gather virtually. Well done. I also want to thank Parath Anand, our Vice Provost for Advances in Learning, for his extraordinary leadership and his service to the university. Earlier this year, when everything started unraveling, I had a lot on my mind, but there was one thing that didn't keep me up at night, and that was our ability to think creatively and comprehensively about moving to online learning. Parath, thank you for enabling at least a bit of shut-eye for me in the early days of this pandemic. And of course, I must thank Rita and Gus Hauser, whose prescient generosity and interest in supporting innovative teaching and learning put us on such a sound footing for a landscape that none of us ever could have imagined or predicted. If either of you has any insights into what's going to happen a decade from now, we are all ears. Eyes and ears forward. That imperative takes me right back to elementary school. Today, we are not so unlike what we were back then, eager to learn, but perhaps distracted. I hope this conference is an opportunity for all of you to focus and to connect in new ways with issues that affect our mission and with one another. For me, the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion is about connection. How do we come to understand and appreciate one another as individuals? And how do we then work together to ensure that everyone in the Harvard community is able to reach their full potential? I recall a meeting I had with a student many years ago, back when I was at MIT. The person commended me for having photos of my wife and children on display at work, something that they had not seen in my colleagues' offices. I realized in that moment that vulnerability, whether intended or not, sends a powerful message about who belongs at an institution. I also recognize that the value of sharing more aspects of my identity as a way to make people feel comfortable and welcome and included, that this was important. There's not much to recommend a pandemic, but it has made more dimensions of our lives visible to one another and created opportunities for the kinds of sympathy and empathy that I think lead one to understand and appreciate others. I imagine that many of you know more about the circumstances of your students' lives and the challenges that they face that you have in years past. And I also imagine that many of your students know a lot more about the circumstances of your life, be they revealed in glimpses of home decor or Zoom bombs by children, pets, the list goes on. That's a good thing. We learn from our differences, and I think this period will change in fundamental ways how we think about teaching people who come from extraordinarily varied backgrounds and how we think about being teachers ourselves. I also think it will change how we manage navigating and encouraging difficult but essential conversations about power and about privilege. Today, you'll have a chance to hear from someone who will be leading our institutional efforts to sustain and spark those conversations in the years to come. Sherry Ann Charleston has been in her role as our Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for just over a month now and is on a listening and learning tour of the university. One of her many skills as an administrative leader is translating theory into practice at an institutional level. So I'm sure this gathering will be a highlight for her when she looks back on her early days at Harvard. Thank you, Dustin, for inviting me to share my thoughts. Thank you all for joining us. And thank you for everything that each and one of you are doing to advance learning and teaching across this university. I know this pandemic keeps us apart, but it's important for us to come together at times like this when we can think together, learn from each other, and try and puzzle through some of the challenges that confront us in the time ahead. It's a privilege and an honor to be with you today, and I look forward to learning from your conversations. Thank you very much.
And now a couple words from our Provost Garber.
Thank you, Dustin. Thank you, Larry. You know, I have to say, having observed what's happened in recent months, I have a new appreciation for what the Office of VPEL has done, for Bharat's leadership, for Dustin's, and for the entire HILT team, the VPEL team and the HILT team. This is a very special occasion, and we should take a moment to just celebrate what we've accomplished in recent months. I actually want to thank in particular Gus and Rita Hauser, whose extraordinary generosity was, as Larry said, prescient in many ways. Many of you here today will recall the first HILT conference, and you may recall when Rita got up and said, with regard to how we educate our students, we just need to tear up the way that we've already done it. We've always done it. We need to burn it down and create something entirely new. And it was a rather provocative statement. Who knew that we would be gathered here, 8 or 9 years later, having just burned it all up because we were forced to by the pandemic. And here I want to say my thanks to the broader community, because our response has been nothing short of extraordinary. When you think about what happened in March, when we shifted from predominantly, almost entirely classroom-based teaching to exclusively remote learning in 2 weeks, it may have seemed like a bumpy transition, but for a move that is this dramatic and this rapid, it was extraordinarily smooth, and it worked incredibly well, despite the problems that many people have identified. And I think we can all take a fair bit of credit, but the VPEL team was in the middle of making this work, along with Hewitt, which had to get the technology to work for this transition. What in my mind is even more impressive is what has happened since the summer, when we had somewhat more time to prepare. And we are still learning about how the fall teaching is going, what the student experience is like. But I would say, again, it's been remarkably effective, and the early signs are that it is really surprisingly successful. You know, I've had another window into what's gone on with teaching in the pandemic through my own family. One of my sons is a student in physics at Stanford. He does experimental physics. And he had to leave the lab for more than 4 months due to the shutdown there and adapt to learning and teaching the course in which he was a TA remotely very quickly. They had to adapt his entire lab, and they tried to make it work. Did reasonably well. My daughter Allison is in the Harvard Teaching Fellows Program and teaching in Boston public schools, and is both a new teacher and somebody who is involved in the experiment that Boston Public Schools is going through right now. She's discovered the joys and the challenges of teaching Boston high school students with the added overlay of the pandemic and the adaptations that the schools have had to make. She's doing all of this, including building relationships with each of her students entirely online, at least for the time being. My youngest is an undergraduate who has been learning remotely since mid-March, dealing with those challenges and actually learning about some of the things that happen better. So from my perspective as a parent, certainly this is a stressful and anxiety-provoking time, but I have seen how effectively different organizations, different schools and universities have coped. It's not perfect, but it has gone better than one might have expected. And I have to say here that the years what HILT has done and what VPEL has done have paid off at Harvard, because I think that our approach to teaching and learning during the pandemic has actually gone extremely well. And I doubt that we would have been able to do this were it not for the experience we had already accrued, were it not for the innovative thinking of all the people who have participated in HILT and in advances in learning generally throughout the university. And were it not for Gus and Rita's visionary gift, as Larry mentioned, I'm not sure that we would have done this nearly as well. In fact, I'm quite confident we would not have. So thank you to the Hausers. Let me just say that although what we have accomplished is extraordinary, and the effort on the part of so many people through the university has been nothing short of amazing, we still need to be ambitious when we think about the future. We have an opportunity not only to adapt to the circumstances of the pandemic, which clearly were unexpected, but to learn from this experience and go beyond and accomplish more. We need to take this opportunity to overcome long-standing challenges in education. Today's conversations will grapple with the hugely important challenges of equity and inclusion in education, in the classroom and beyond. The timing to grapple with these daunting and long-standing issues could not be better. We are going to be discussing questions such as, how do we retain a commitment to academic rigor while supporting students dealing with extraordinary uncertainties and challenges? And here I have to mention, I am not participating in this conference with my ordinary laptop and my setup for web conferences because I had a technical failure. Very few students have access to the kind of technical support that I have. And when you think about what can go wrong in so many ways for so many people, you realize we need to do our best to ensure that everybody can thrive in this new environment. How do we encourage respectful disagreement and practice active listening? How do we build a sense of community among the learners in our remote classrooms and provide brave spaces to safely foster challenging dialogue? How can we build equitable learning opportunities for our students, no matter their backgrounds, accessibility needs, or differentiated learning styles? How do we attempt to level the playing field for students with fewer resources or who have unique challenges at home during a time when almost all learning is occurring remotely? without the equalizing forces that we have in the residential environments on our campus. This year, I think I speak for many of us, for most of us, probably nearly all of us, in saying that we feel an especially urgent need to create truly excellent learning experiences for the students who have entrusted us with their educations. Today's conference is an inspiring and action-oriented opportunity to deepen that commitment. We can't expect to come up with definitive solutions in one day. But as previous HILT conferences have shown, we can learn from each other and leave better informed and energized to take on these challenges that are at the very heart of our mission. Thank you to everyone who is here for your participation and for your dedication to improved learning. And I want to just turn this over to Parath with my deepest thanks for all he and his team have done.
Thank you, Alan, for those kind words, and to President Bakov as well.